In this episode, Dave McCarthy and John Fischer join me to discuss the offside goal in the Jackets and Canes game. We talk about Pittsburgh's new management and COVID harming the NHL schedule. In Team ISO, Ross Levitan joins the show to talk about Brady Tkachuk and the free-falling Ottawa Senators. Hit the music. Welcome to Jablam Sports Hockey, folks. I'm your host, Peter Mojaranov, and the mic is always on. You can find me on Twitter at Russia98. You can find the full show at Jablam Sports. If you have any questions or comments, please tweet us. Use the hashtag Jablam Sports. That's JABLAM Sports. Please subscribe to us if you haven't done so yet, and click on the three dots in your podcasting app. Share our show with three hockey fans you know. Thank you, everyone. Remember, check out our website, go to jablamsports.com to see all our podcasts and even game notes for each episode. You'll get links to all the things we mentioned on the show, including guests. For our podcasts, click on podcasts and then hockey on this show specifically right on our website. Time for some Trending Now. Our guests this week on Trending Now Roundtable are Dave McCarthy. He's the Toronto correspondent for NHL.com, a correspondent for NHL Network, and you can also listen to him on Sirius XM Radio NHL Sunday Brunch. What time is that usually, Dave?
It's usually 11 a.m. on Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Sometimes, because we got to get 2 hours of the brunch, we got a noon Eastern start, we got to move up to 10, but it's usually 11 a.m. Eastern on Sunday.
And also back on the show is John Fischer, who's been covering the Devils for over 10 years, and you can read his work on allaboutthejersey.com, a part of SB Nation. You can find them both on Twitter at JK Fischer for John, and of course Dave as well, at Dave A. McCarthy. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for having me back.
Thanks, guys. So a lot has dropped in the last few days. It's been wild. I thought I was planning on talking a little bit more about the weekend, and we'll get to COVID, and we'll get to Wayne Simmons and the injuries and stuff like that with the Devils and the Leafs. And we'll also get to another thing which dropped today, which was Bell Media cuts. And we won't talk about that right now with Trending Now. I'm going to talk about that in my Team ISO segment with TSN's 1050's Ross Levitan, and all you listeners can go check that out. That'll be out in 20 or so minutes into this podcast. But we'll talk about what just dropped even hours ago as we're recording this on Tuesday evening, and most of you are listening to this Wednesday or Thursday. But the Pittsburgh Penguins today announced Brian Burke as president of hockey operations and Ron Hextall as the new general manager. And from listening to Tim and Sid today on Sportsnet in Canada, Brian Burke said the owners want another parade. Sounds as if, though, he was they were asking Burke for his opinion on who to fill in for the position, and then they decided to change it up and choose him. John, where do you see them? Are they going to move on and tank, or swerve with Tim and Sid, but Sidney Crosby, Malkin, Letang, or are they gonna maybe try to go kind of all in on a team who doesn't look like they're gonna find the playoffs?
They are in a tough spot. I know Jim Rutherford is a legend of the business. He's a well-respected executive, but my goodness, he has not left a pretty place for Mr. Hextall and Mr. Burke to pick up the pieces. I'm briefly looking at Cap Friendly right now. Mm-hmm. For the 2021 draft, you know, the Penguins have always been a go-for-it team for the last decade plus, which, as you should. You have Crosby, you have Malkin, you have Gensel, you have all these players. Go for it, fine. But that means is that your prospect cupboard is fairly bare, and you're going into the next draft with just a second-round pick, a fifth-round pick, and 3 seventh-rounders. And this is going to be the weirdest draft in a long time. So It's not like you're going to have any young guys on ELCs coming in to challenge for positions or make anything difference. And worse than that is that they are right up against the cap, like right now. As of this recording, they have a projected cap space of $152,000. Mm-hmm. Toronto fans know what that's like to be that right up against it. You can't get even a minor league player up into the system. You're basically committed to this roster as is, unless you start selling pieces off. And of course, if you do that, how are you going to go for it? And more importantly, as well-respected as Burke is, and I'm sure Hextall has a lot of friends in higher places, they ain't going to be so friendly when it comes to talking trades, because they know the situation too. They know that with Pittsburgh, what assets are they going to offer that they're willing to give up to, quote-unquote, go for it? So, in other words, they kind of have to go with this team. I just don't think they're good enough. I think it's going to fall apart. And case in point, we're talking right now, as much as the East Division has been on pause for at least half of the teams at this point, Pittsburgh is not exactly that much better than New Jersey, Buffalo, the Rangers, or the Islanders at the moment. They're certainly not as good as Philadelphia, Boston, or Washington is right now.
Dave,
good luck, guys.
Yeah, Dave, do you think there's any move that Burke can make in this COVID world? Are there guys like maybe a Derek Stepan or a Sam Bennett that are kind of wanting to leave, but I don't know how they can fit it under that cap?
Well, Derek Stepan is not a guy at this point that's really going to change the fortunes of a team, right? I mean, he's a complimentary player at best at this point in his career. And Sam Bennett, there's obviously a familiarity there with Brian Burke from his time in Calgary. And I like Sam Bennett as a player. I just don't know if they're only a Sam Bennett away. Well, I do know they are more than a Sam Bennett away. But I'm not surprised that that the response from Brian is that the ownership in Pittsburgh wants another parade. That's ultimately what led to Jimmy Rutherford deciding that it would be best to go in a different direction, because I think he understood where this team was, and where it was not necessarily a contender, and that he wanted to make some moves to try to usher in the next wave of talent. And that ownership was reticent against that. And then I think Jim ultimately decided that, the point I'm at in my career, if you're not going to let me make the moves that I think need to be made, maybe it's best to step aside. So, as Brian himself always says, ownership can do what they want. They write the checks at the end of the day. And they're willing to bring in Brian and Ron to give it a shot, to try to assemble in short order some alterations to that roster that can put them back into contention. That's their prerogative. And, I'm not surprised that Brian and Ron would want to take on that challenge, especially if you know that you have that mandate from ownership. The question is, I don't know if they're going to be able to get that done in short enough a window that they're going to need to in order to contend. Sidney Crosby is still Sidney Crosby. Evgeny Malkin, I don't know, from the beginning of this season, I don't know if he is still Evgeny Malkin. Is he in the midst of a bad stretch, or is his play starting to diminish from where it was? Maybe he's in a bit of a bad stretch. If they can make some moves, he can get back to a more dominant level. I see them as a playoff team this year, at least one that could be in the mix, but I do not see them as a contender, having to beat teams like, Washington or Boston, or the Maple Leafs, or even Montreal at this point. I don't see them in that same realm right now. So it'll be tough, but ownership's prerogatives to do what they want. And I can understand why they want to take another couple kicks at it while they still have Sid and Evgeny on the roster.
There was more fun news coming out of Columbus. They played Carolina a couple days ago, where the NHL seemed like they made a few blunders. They allowed an offside goal from the Canes to happen, and it seemed like they had some communication mix-up there between the refs and the goal on the ice. And since Tortorella challenged it, they lost the challenge and had to take a team penalty. Well, during the intermission, they finally got in contact with the league, and they rescinded the penalty of the goal. John, what should they have done there? Do you think that was the right call by the league?
Absolutely not. How many times do we watch in professional sports? And I have to say professional sports because it's not just limited to the NHL anymore. Like even soccer, the world's oldest game has, a VAR system, and the mantra for this is we got to get the calls right. We got to get the calls right. Okay. What's the second mantra that comes out with that? It's if you're not sure, whatever happens on the field of play stands. And this was a classic case where instead of, relying on others to tell you, given the communication mix up, they should have just said, you know what, it's offside, but instead of giving out the penalty, we'll just treat it like a regular offside and leave it at that. I mean, or if the original call on the ice was a goal and you don't have the 100% confirmation from Toronto and you called goal, keep it as a goal and say, I'm sorry, other team. It sucks, but, we couldn't fully overturn it because we didn't have 100% of the information, same as what they are supposed to do. But instead, they went with what they saw and then they got wrong. And this is kind of like the worst case scenario of all these review systems, instant replay systems, VAR systems that every fan and apparently every coach has nightmares about. Like, heaven forfend this happens in the playoffs for a championship, that sort of thing. We can't say that the human error, this whole system is meant to take out human error, and we found a human way to put an error back into it, such as life. So in retrospect, this was a big mistake. The one positive silver lining out of this is now you can make corrections to the system as needed. Of course, that's not going to give Columbus their win. And if I recall correctly, that goal could have been important in how the game went on. I believe it was a 1-goal loss for them.
In my opinion, I don't know. I've had enough with these offside challenges. And in my opinion, I hate when they review of them because of the goal happening actually 30 seconds after the call. That's terrible. Which was barely offside to begin with by maybe a hair or two. So it's been pissing me off since.
But offside, right? Nonetheless.
Yes, it was. But when they when they instated the rule with Matt Duchene. Yeah. I thought it came up with something totally different, which what the goal was. But go ahead, Dave.
No, you're not wrong about that. Mm-hmm. But see, what people have to keep in mind, and the general managers are always very cognizant of this, there are always unintended consequences to every rule change, every policy change that you make. And you're right. The ability to review an offside was brought in so that we wouldn't have another Matt Duchene situation where the guy was 6 strides offside and somehow it got missed. But, okay, well, what if the guy is a half stride offside? Well, where do you draw the line? He is offside nonetheless. So if you've brought in the ability to review a call, then you're obligated to review every call that is in question, however tedious it may be. So, I don't have a problem with the reviewing of offsides. Is it tedious? Yes. Is it tedious in baseball when we go to video replay to see if the guy has his glove on the guy's leg as he slides into second, but then pops off, even though we beat the tag? Did he come off the base even just a second? But the rule is the rule, right? So you're obligated to live with the consequences that come because of it. With this situation here, and my point on that is, well, if you didn't like what happened here, but you're also saying you don't like the challenging, but you want the challenging so that you can get rid of the human error, but then you don't like the challenging because, it's just you're arguing two different things. So it doesn't work. The situation in this case was it a mistake? Yeah, it was a mistake. But mistakes happen. The point is, with the ability to challenge calls, how often are we having this conversation? Not very often. How often would we be having it in times where there was no ability to challenge it? But now with technology the way it is, we would all see when a guy is a half foot offside. And don't you think for a second it would go all over Twitter? Oh, look, that goal was scored. The guy's toe was offside. Well, you can't challenge it. But it was so they should be able. So you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It's a difficult argument because a lot of people like to have it two ways, but they don't realize they're having it both ways. In this case, it was a mistake. Yes. Did it cost Columbus? It probably cost Columbus. But did it cost them any more in this way than it does if a penalty gets called that in hindsight clearly isn't a penalty, but then you give up a goal and you end up losing by a goal. No, I mean, you ended up losing on a bad call. This was a bad call. Bad calls happen. The key now is how do you move forward because of it? And credit to Columbus. They moved forward effectively, and they won last night in their next game.
Yeah, they did. For me, it's a little tough when the play continues so far past the minuscule offside. Dave,
but if the play never comes back out over the zone, if the call had been made appropriately, which I grant from an official's perspective can be difficult to miss at times when it's so slightly offside, but it would have been called nonetheless. So if it comes back out over the zone and then comes back in, that's a different story. But if the play stays in the zone, I'm sorry, it's offside, whether it was a second later, 2 seconds later, or a minute and a half later.
And to Dave's point, Pandora's box has effectively been opened for this type of situation. Like this is not the first season of having an offside challenge. It's not like, now that we just put this in, oh, we don't like it, let's get rid of it. Like it's been in place for several seasons. So to Dave's point, what the Board of Governors want and the union has signed off on is, yeah, we want to have a look at this to make sure that everything is legal and on the up and up with the zone entries and so forth. So to your point, Peter, I get it. It is silly to call back a goal 30 seconds after an offside should have been called. But, we have those rare cases, delayed calls can last a minute, or we have cases where somebody misses something and then we realize, oh, that shouldn't have counted. There was actually a goal and we let play continue because we missed it. So we're going to wind the clock back 2 minutes or however long, between
But how often does that happen though, right?
Exactly. It's so rare that it almost begs the question, do we really need to change the rule for an exception? No. I do think that there should be some corrective actions with the review process, like the actual communication between Toronto and the game itself. That's the bigger concern, especially in this day and age, with the COVID times and all that, we're more reliant than ever on remote communication. So if there's a gap in that in this game, I want to make sure that there's not going to be any other gaps for future reviews. Because again, at the end of the day here, you got to go back to that old mantra. If you don't get the full 100% go ahead from the people in Toronto, then stick to whatever you called on the ice and say, look, that it is what it is. I think trying to have it both ways is when you get into controversies like this one where nobody's happy at the end of it.
Dave, one last bit for this before we move on. Would you have disallowed the goal then in the second period and then I guess restarted the clock and added a minute and a half there?
No, once the play starts, you cannot go back on a goal.
They did go back on the clock for the penalty though, right? So I guess technically you could because of the rules, even though the rule states about not calling the goal back, but I guess they called the penalty back, right? Which was whatever's left in that penalty.
That's where I think even more kerfuffle came out. It was because it turned into a half measure, right? Where you tried to half a piece, but you didn't go all the way. But once the puck is dropped, you can't go back on a goal, and that's for a variety of reasons. But it was a mistake at the end of the day, and I like the point that was made, which was perhaps this is an opportunity to pay a little bit more attention and refine the communications process, or at least look at it, make sure it is as efficient as possible. That's where I think good can come out of this. Sitting and moaning and bitching and whining that a mistake happened. Now, I hate to tell you, mistakes are going to happen. And what I will tell you is there is no opportunity whatsoever that John Tortorella in that locker room will allow his players to hang on this and let this become something that they grind their axe in all game long or all year long. It was a mistake. Yeah, it sucks. Now let's show what kind of a team we are and move forward. Because guess what? We're in game 12 of the regular season. There's a lot of hockey yet to be played. If they play the way they're capable of playing the rest of the year, won't much matter.
And I think COVID did come into play here with the headsets and them not being able to communicate properly with the NHL. Dave, you wrote a great article about the Leafs and their series against the Canucks. And you wrote that the Leafs swept the Canucks easily in a 3-game series. Auston Matthews with the game winner in the last game, and of course you stated that he scored 10 goals in his 8-game goal streak. So he's leading the league in goals with 11, 2 ahead of the rest of the pack. Can he win the Rocket this year to lead the league in goals?
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely. He could win the Rocket, and quite frankly, I think he should be in the category for Hart Trophy contention. He's playing that good, and it's okay to say that in this marketplace. A lot of times you make a statement like that, and it's Toronto media, of course. Well, no, I'm sorry. He is playing really that good when he has the puck, but more importantly to me, when he doesn't have the puck. The way he's tracking back in the zone, the way he's taking care of his defensive responsibilities, the way he's moving the puck out of the zone, the way he's getting on top of his check quickly to force turnovers. He's playing like a Hart Trophy contender right now, as much as, if not greater, than what Connor McDavid is doing at Edmonton. And McDavid is having an unbelievable year. But he's put himself in that echelon. It's no longer, Matthews and Pettersson, and Scheifele and Laine, and Ovechkin and Marchand. No, Matthews has put himself a level above those guys right now. The way he is playing, to me, it's Connor McDavid, it's Auston Matthews. Maybe David Pastrnak, maybe.
What about Draisaitl?
But then it's Draisaitl in that realm. But I think Matthews has been dramatically better. And that, again, Draisaitl's playing great, but Matthews really has been that good. Like when he's on the ice, he makes it look so easy to score goals. Where you look at him and at the end of the night, you say to yourself, yeah, he should have two goals because he's getting chances at will. That's how good he's playing right now. He's
almost Lemieux-esque, could you say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Not to compare him to Mario Lemieux, because that's nuts. But the way he's commanding the game right now, and the impact that he's having on the group, the success that they're having as a team, he should be a Hart Trophy contender this year. We fall into this realm where, it's going to be Connor McDavid until the end of time. Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a contender every year, but Matthews really is playing that good this year.
Let's go on to COVID news. John, you wrote an article about what's going on with the Devils, and of course they have some more guys getting on that list. 3 more games were postponed, and today Claude Giroux, Justin Braun were placed on the NHL COVID-19 protocol list, and the Devils are now up to 19 players on the list. It seems as if the Devils also have kind of spread the virus a little bit around with maybe referees and the Sabres are furious. John Vogel of The Athletic, he states that the Buffalo Sabres organization are upset about this and that the situation could totally be avoided. What are the Devils not really doing here of containing this virus?
Well, unfortunately, with the NHL protocols, all we know is that they're on the protocol list. We don't have the information of, are you on there because you're going to be joining the team, which is the case for Nico Hischier joining the list and Sami Vatanen joining the list, because both of those players have not been members. They haven't been with the team since last season. Hischier's been out injured. Vatanen was not signed until the beginning of January, and he had to go through visa issues to even get into the country, much less, join the Devils. Connor Carrick, he was with the team, and then he left before the first game in Buffalo that Saturday because he needed to see his newborn child, and congratulations to the Carricks for doing so. So, I mean, that's 3 of your 19 players where they're on the list, but we don't know if they're on the list because of precautionary, they need to return to the team reasons, or they got into contact with somebody while they were away with the team, or they had a false positive, or we don't know. I mean, we can, presume that the Devils at least had one legitimate positive case in Mackenzie Blackwood, who was the first Devil to join the list way back on January 19th, and he was pulled before the game against the Islanders. Now, nothing bad happened. No Devil followed the list after that game. No Islander joined the list after that game. In fact, just Josh Bailey came off the list because he had a false positive. So he was only on it for 2 days. So Blackwood was out for 12 days, and he was pulled off the list just as the Devils were adding more and more players to the list. So, and it is a substantial amount of the players that played in that game on Sunday against the Buffalo, which Buffalo, I think, has a legitimate beef to say, Palmieri was pulled last minute. If you didn't know if it was a legit positive or a positive case, but not asymptomatic or whatever the case may be, in retrospect, maybe that game should not have been played with the news that Palmieri was pulled. And you can see that the NHL has learned that lesson, because the moment that they got word that after Travis Sanheim entered the list on Monday and Braun and Giroux were going to be added onto it today, they postponed the game they were supposed to have right now against the Capitals. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be the main lesson out of this is, if there's a positive case from any of the players right before a game, and there's reason to believe that it's not a case of a false positive, like, you failed 1 out of 4 tests and, maybe you're okay, then you postpone the games, which for health reasons is the right thing to do. For scheduling reasons, it's going to be making things more tricky, but that has to come secondary in this case. So at the end of the day here, unfortunately, Buffalo's now up to 9 players on their list, not including Ralph Kruger, who's their head coach. The two linesmen that worked the Sunday games now in protocol themselves. So it's becoming clearer that Sunday game was a transmission point to some degree. And that's going to make things even more awkward and more concerning for the other teams to say, well, hold on, why should we be playing games if we can transmit positive cases in this sense? So unfortunately, to put it bluntly, it just sucks right now for New Jersey. Obviously, there's no games being played for this last week or this week. Their opponents are going to be appropriately concerned if the Devils are truly A-OK to return. We're looking at the 16th against our hated rivals, the New York Rangers. Who knows if that game is going to happen? I mean, originally the Devils were supposed to return on the 11th, and that was postponed on Monday night. So, who's to say that game is going to happen on the 16th? I guess the one small solace is that just because this is happening in the East doesn't mean the other divisions have to stop play. Like the North Division is unaffected. The other 2 divisions are unaffected. But they're probably going to be paying attention to what the league does with their protocols and their testing regimes in light of what they're learning out of the Devils situation. Whatever that is remains to be seen. And, of course, with anything league-related, it's got to be approved by the union. And as we all know, Peter and Dave, the union may or may not agree if they don't think it's good for them. So, lots of hurdles to jump through, unfortunately. But yeah, it's just a crummy situation right now. And at the end of the day, I just hope that all these guys are able to come back with fairly minor impacts to their livelihoods, much less their games.
This is a fair bit of a predicament that the NHL has put themselves into here with coming back and playing this sport, a game that's very containable with the ice and the dry air. Mm-hmm. It's tough. Dave, I want to get your opinion on this. What do you think the league will have to do in terms of scheduling? And if some divisions are way behind the others, especially according to the North Scotia division, who obviously with the numbers in Canada are on pace to complete the season smoothly, what will happen there? And can another division maybe play in a week or 2 longer before the playoffs start? How are they going to do this?
Well, what I will say is that the league is hell-bent on making sure they get back on schedule for the beginning of next season. That is the primary focus right now. They want to start the 2021-22 season round about the beginning to the middle of October. So any decision that gets made on this season will have that target in mind. The thing with intra-division play this year is that if Canada, for example, is able to go and play the full 56-game schedule, that's great. If another division can't get quite to 56 games within a reasonable amount of time, rescheduling games after the season, I don't think it would be the worst thing from a competitive imbalance standpoint to pick a number as we move through the season and try to get every team to that. In other words, say the Central Division, okay, well, you know what? 48 games going to be the amount that we're going to try to get to in that division, because 56 in and of itself, right, is a relatively arbitrary number. So would be 48. So I don't think there would be a huge issue there. And given the fact that all of the teams compete within the division, it's not like one team is getting points from outside the division where they maybe had a run of games against a weaker opponent early in the schedule, and then another team within their division was going to get that same weaker team, but later in their schedule that is now being canceled. So that's not fair. You're not going to run into this situation this year. So in a year like this, where I think everybody has got to find a way to lower their expectations from where they would be in a regular year. Like, some stuff is going to suck this year, and that's just the way it's going to be. And it's what you're going to have to get used to. I don't think it's the worst thing if one division or two divisions play less than the 56 games that were the intention coming in. I don't think it would really throw too much of a wrench into the schedule in the season from a competitiveness standpoint, just because everybody plays within the division. Will they like to try to get everybody to 56 games? Of course, but not at the expense of making another division wait around 3 weeks after the season wraps up at the beginning of May, so that everybody else can catch up and then have it affect when they can start next year. That's not going to be a starter.
Again, you can find them on Twitter, Dave at Dave A. McCarthy and John at JK Fischer. Thanks for coming on the show, gentlemen. Let's head to the Capitol. We're going to team ISO this week, the Ottawa Senators. With me today is Ross Levitan. He joins us. He's the producer at TSN 1050. And you can listen to him on the Locked On Senators podcast daily. Is it daily?
Yeah, 5 times a week, man.
Holy smokes. You can also find him on Twitter at Ross Levitan. Ross, welcome to the show.
Hey, really happy to be here, Peter. Thanks for having me.
So I did want to touch base on this, and especially with people know myself, I'm working with Rogers at City News in Toronto. You're working with TSN in Toronto as well. So separate entities, but there were some bad news dealt with us. Again, already this week there was cutbacks, and then today dropped. Obviously, we record this on Tuesday. The episode comes out on Wednesday. TSN in Vancouver, 1040. TSN 1290 in Winnipeg, and TSN 1150 in Hamilton are all no longer sports stations. Rough news.
Yeah, it's tough news. And I mean, we're going through a global pandemic, so you're expecting things to be tight wherever industry you seem to be in. But it's just unfortunate news. So many talented people, nobody deserving of losing their jobs. And when you hear like the entire station shutting down, it's just shocking news. You know, you hear of a host here or maybe a show there, but for the entire station, I mean, it was shocking and sad news. Absolutely.
Yeah, people know me a little bit as a bit of an emotional wild card guy. So I have highs and I have lows. So I actually did not feel good hearing all that. We've had guests that work with TSN and Bell from across the country, like yourself, and even most recently we had Jeff Patterson, and it sucks to hear guys like Jeff Patterson and others being laid off.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you nailed it right on the head. It's any day where sports media isn't thriving in the country, nobody's better off for it. So let's just hope that out of the ashes comes some sort of phoenix where maybe they band together and create their own. I know when there's a bunch of writer cuts all over newspaper industries a few years ago, and then next thing you know, The Athletic comes out of nowhere and really became its own entity and gave a lot of people work. And I mean, I subscribe to that site as well. And it's great to see talented people will find a way to succeed no matter what. So it feels like a slap in the face today. I mean, it certainly is, but you got to think that there's too much talent that got let go to stay down for too long. So thoughts are with them, their families, obviously such uncertain times as is. And I just know that there's going to be a lot that are able to bounce back sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we all hope they bounce back, and our team at Blame Sports hopes they do as well. Yeah, you were speaking about The Athletic. I sign up for them. I love it. Their app is great. Hopefully there could be something in the future similar. I know radio content, podcasting, maybe there's a new network can be formed to maybe bring some jobs back. We'll hope. We can see.
Yeah, well said.
Let's talk about some Senators. And we all expected the Senators. It's hard transition right now. But I want to talk about the Senators here. We all predicted them to be, I guess, in the basement. We had our preview episode. I think it was season 6 now, episode 6. This is episode 9. Scotia North Division. A lot of people thought that they would be down there, but not this bad. As of Tuesday evening, they only have 2 wins. They're 3 points behind the Wings, who are in second last, a .192 winning percentage. But they've looked a little bit better defensively, at least the last few games. Could they climb out of the basement at all?
No, probably not. I mean, it's so far gone right off the bat. You're looking at 2 wins in the first 13 games of the season, Peter. But you mentioned the back end, and it was a couple of personnel changes. Now, Eric Brandstrom comes in. He's a blue chip prospect. Everyone knows the centerpiece of the Mark Stone trade. The Senators need him, no question, to develop into a top 4, maybe even a top 2 defenseman if they want any chance of success here in the near future. However, he then gets a hard hit behind the net last night and is in what was his 4th game or 3rd maybe, and he's going to be out for the next week or 10 days. So he's out, and then Christian Wolanin comes in, another young defenseman who the team and fans are very excited about. And we'll see. It's a bit of a transitional year, especially on that back end. They brought in a few veterans to transition, but right now, Ottawa's farm team, I mentioned Christian Wolanin, the North Dakota product. Well, right now, half of that North Dakota blue line is Senators property, including 5th overall pick Jake Sanderson. So when it comes to the rebuild, I think the forwards are more along the way than the back end. And we're seeing that a lot in the defensive zone coverage. There's been some porous turnovers. There's been, situations where they'll let in 1 and the next thing you know, there's 2, 3, 4, even in the back of the net in quick succession. So those are signs of a younger team, but what fans can grasp at is it's not the young players that are making the young mistakes for the most part. Mm-hmm. It seems like the veterans that were brought in, most notably Derek Stepan, Cedric Paquette, Braden Coburn, all, in 4th line role if you're Derek Stepan, or even just out of the lineup waivers if you're Braden Coburn, they just haven't worked out. And there's some critics who would have told you right when those signings happened that they never would have worked out. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a saying amongst general managers that kids always have to earn their spot no matter what. And it almost felt like the team and the organization was putting roadblocks in the way of these kids to see if they could handle that adversity and excel. And that's pretty much what happened. Because if you're looking at the points on this team, it's like a 19-year-old, a 22-year-old, a 21-year-old, and then Thomas Chabot's like the elder statesman there at 24. Those are the building blocks for the future. I don't think this year is realistic. Right now, as of this morning, we're recording on Tuesday, February 9th right now. Ottawa's got the best chance at the 1st overall pick. And that's including a situation where Seattle's already guaranteed 11%. So Ottawa, even more so than that. It sounds like it's not really the ideal year to tank. But last year seemed like the top end of the draft was great, and Ottawa had 2 picks in the top 5. So maybe you make up for it in that sense, despite not having their top 5 pick in 2019 still because of the Matt Duchene trade. But I think one more draft pick here isn't the worst thing, and you can tell something's building. And the early steps of success are how the minor league team's doing. And I got to work the last 2 years with the Belleville Senators, and they were unbelievable. Their average age was like 22, but the kids were going out and really leading the way. Drake Batherson at the top of the league in points per game. Josh Norris won the AHL Rookie of the Year as a 20-year-old coming out of college. So there's a lot to look forward to if you're a Sens fan, Peter. But if you're asking me about this season, it's a lost cause in the wins and losses category. It's about development. It's about seeing the young players play important games later on. So we'll see how long they can extend that. But right now it's tough sledding, to say the least.
We'll touch base on some of those young core players in a bit. And of course, Jake Sanderson. when we were talking about the back end and some of the young guys, and now Brandstrom is injured, they've been teaming him up and Wolanin. I guess, how do you fix the back end there? They're teaming them up with Goodbranson, I'm guessing. What do you do with him?
Yeah, we're going to see. The other addition, I mentioned the one in Eric Brandstrom coming in, but they have this unrestricted free agent Russian defenseman who came in, Artem Zub. And, you never know what to expect about these guys. Is he going to be a Nikita Zaitsev or an Igor Ozhiganov or a Mikko Lehtinen? These are some of the guys coming over from the KHL more recently. And Zaitsev, maybe not the greatest performance in Toronto, but he's actually looked really good in Ottawa this season after another down year last year. But with Artem Zub, just seems like a really solid defender, a guy with an active stick in his own zone, can kill penalties and lay the body. And he's done that a few times this year as well. But it's going to be a transition into that younger core, because right now you have Thomas Chabot at 24 years old. He's your staple. He's got 8 years left on his contract. As he goes, the D-core will go. But behind him, you need more puck movers. They brought in a lot of big bodies. You mentioned Goodbranson. Josh Brown is another. Braden Coburn, the third. I mentioned he's been on waivers now. But they brought in those, get the crease cleared type guys. Just strong, but they aren't really the best puck movers. So that's where you're hoping a guy like Wolanin can come in. Mike Riley's there, but again, more so just a Band-Aid at this point until these younger players are ready. And we'll see what they can do. But there's the makings of a good D-core, I think, somewhere in there. And not only Jake Sanderson in North Dakota, but another first-round pick, Jacob Bernard-Docker, led all of Team Canada defensemen at ice time when they won the gold medal, not this year, but in 2020 World Junior Tournament. So I think there's the pieces, and you can see the sketch of what a really good team and the D-core will look like. They just need the right coaching and the right development on their way. And I think they'll get there. I think that Matt Murray's a bit of a question mark, although he's been a lot better in the last 3 games, a .942 save percentage over those 3 games, 2 of them being against Montreal, right neck and neck with Toronto as the best team in the North Division. So I think that a lot of what's to come will rely on Matt Murray, and you could say that about any team and any goalie. That's just a game of hockey. But as it comes to building a team, I think Ottawa just needs to lean on its pro scouts a little bit more and get more from them, because they haven't been able to identify that much talent in the pro ranks. But the amateur scouting, on the other hand, has done a fantastic job of really stacking the pipeline. Scott Wheeler, again, we were talking about The Athletic. We really respect his opinion, and he came out with his prospect rankings of your team pipelines, and Ottawa just came in 3rd on that list behind only the Kings and the New York Rangers. So I think when you look at that, funny enough, the 3 first teams that drafted this past year as well, when you look at LA and New York. But right now it's just about getting through that pain, or that growing pains. And we'll see how that ends up coming through after that.
You touched on Matt Murray. And of course, we all know he's a Stanley Cup winner, and he hasn't been playing well already with a .883 save percentage. And you did say that he's slowly getting his groove back the last few games. Hogberg, back him up, has been even worse. He doesn't have a win yet, 4 losses, .844 save percentage. And there's enough blame to go around with the defense and the goaltending. Matt Murray slowly playing better the last few games. Can he find that groove that he had when he was winning those Stanley Cups?
I hope so. I was saying I got roasted a little bit, but I put a tweet out from my account just saying if this Matt Murray was around in 2017, Ottawa would be Stanley Cup champions. Obviously, that Eastern Conference final in 2017, Ottawa chases Fleury in Game 3. They're up 2-1 in the series at that point, and then Matt Murray came in and looked fantastic on his way to winning that series. 2-1 in Game 7 in double overtime rather. So he was just unreal in the Pittsburgh crease. So you hope that he can get back to that, but then you look, it's been a couple of years now in a row, the glove hand, it seems like it's difficult for him to catch the puck, but he does have this natural athleticism and squareness that he's really good at getting out on pucks. So if he can work on limiting second and third opportunities, I think he's going to get there. He's still only 26 years old. And you mentioned Cup champ, 2-time Cup champ, before he even played a full NHL season. So there's a lot riding on him. They're paying him. He's the 7th highest paid goalie in the National Hockey League. And like you pointed out, he's got about the 60th best save percentage. So the numbers are going to have to even out here for Ottawa to have a chance.
Their goals per game allowed is the worst in the league, but their offense isn't much better. Third last in the league, and their special teams isn't helping them at all. There are too many problems to fix, but on offense, where should they start?
Well, I like what they're doing on offense. I have no issue. If the scoring's not there right now, you're going to get those games, especially there's so many good goalies up here. And this North Division, I think long-term is really going to benefit Ottawa because they don't get the games against Buffalo and Detroit and Florida for that matter. Maybe to a lesser extent. I know they're off to a great start, but you're playing against great teams every night. And Ottawa's trying to incorporate these young players. And Josh Norris, for example, had that unbelievable AHL season last year, 31 goals, 61 points. And then he's coming up here and they put him with Brady Tkachuk. They were best friends going back to when they played U.S. national team. They were line mates there as well. So I think they like that familiarity between Josh Norris and Brady Tkachuk. But whatever line Brady Tkachuk is on is your number one line. And therefore, you're going up against Elias Pettersson one night, Mark Scheifele the next night, Auston Matthews, and Philip Deneau. That's a lot to ask for a 21-year-old who's just got 1 year pro under his belt. So I think it's baptism by fire for this Ottawa Senators team, and you're going to have these growing pains along the way. Like 8 straight losses, it's nothing new in Ottawa, right? The first year they had their team back, it took them, I think, 30 games to get to 3 wins. So they've seen it before. Obviously, this is not an expansion team, but it certainly has a bit of that vibe because, frankly, no player outside of Thomas Chabot and Brady Tkachuk, the fans like definitively know. If you're just a casual fan, there's so much turnover on the roster. Like even just talking to my parents, and funny to use them as an example, but like they're casual fans. They like watching. And my mom's like, I don't know any of these players. There's so much turnover. So it's about finding the right guys and putting them in the right spots to succeed. And that's what this year and next year are going to be about, finding the little pieces on the chessboard and trying to put together something. But the style that DJ Smith coaches, you know what you're going to get. Meat and potatoes, hard on the forecheck, stand up for your teammates, and try to cycle in the offensive zone. He doesn't like so much off the rush play as he doesn't want to go end to end and trade chances. He wants you to get the puck in deep, grind down low, and hopefully wear a team down. Get traffic to the net. That's something he preached. Ottawa has not done enough of, is get into the eyes and sight line of the other team's goalie. And he thinks that if they can do that, they're going to generate a lot more offense just naturally.
I recall you bringing me up with all the changes and your parents not knowing who's who. I remember a couple years ago when they moved on in the direction of going a little bit younger, and I can't remember who the reporter was, but they were interviewing fans before the game, and she was like, who are you excited to see this season? And she was like, Erik Karlsson. They've already moved on with Erik Karlsson. He's already gone to San Jose.
Yeah, no doubt.
That was pretty funny. But the bright spot is on this young core with the Brady Tkachuks and Thomas Chabots, Tim Stützle, Batherson, and Norris, you've mentioned. Tkachuk already looks pretty good. He's leading the way with points, tied with Chabot, of course, doubling him in shots on net. What has Brady done even better to up his game this season?
Well, I don't think he has, and that's something that's going to need a bit more fine-tuning is occasionally he's chasing the big hit, and I think he knows that there's so much pressure on him. When he was a rookie, he got to play with Mark Stone for the majority of the year until the trade deadline. That was huge for him. Just the calming demeanor that Mark Stone has, and you see how he's blown up in Vegas, but everyone knew in Ottawa just how special a player Mark Stone is. Anyone who played with him immediately got a big boost. Zach Smith scored 26 goals playing with Mark Stone. Zach Smith's a fourth liner. He's gotten a lot of people paid just by being himself. So same with Colin White was on that line with those two guys. And Brady Tkachuk, what he brings is that tenacity and that willingness to compete every night. Now, do you want to see maybe a bit more stick skills from him and a bit more maybe for a top 5 pick? But what he brings, the intangibles and the willingness not only to compete, but to get in front of the net and get into the dirty areas. He's the one guy. And there's a great stat brought up on TSN maybe last week. He's the fastest player to 500 hits and 500 shots on goal since 95, 96. And the other guys on that list, they're not even close. Like 2 and 5 is separated by 100, and then he's 100 past 2. And the guys on that list are like Gabriel Landeskog and Olin Nolan, guys who are known at being physical threats, but also scoring threats. So he just has it, like same with Matthew Tkachuk. You can just tell they were raised so perfectly by a hockey family and a guy like Keith Tkachuk, who's just the ultimate teammate, competitor, professional. And it comes off in how Brady handles himself. And he's huge. Like, I don't think he gets enough credit of how big of a kid Brady Tkachuk is. He's in his third NHL season and he's 21 years old. So the best is yet to come for this guy. When he grows, he's like 6'5", almost like 220 pounds already. He is going to be a complete freak to move in front of the net. I compare him a lot to Jamie Benn. I think that's a similar type trajectory that Brady can have in his career.
I'm just glad he's a little bit less like his maybe nastier brother.
Yeah. Well, he's going to be the first guy into every scrum, but maybe he does it a little more face-to-face than his brother.
You were mentioning earlier that the Sens are trying to, fill in the stopgap with some of these forwards that maybe not people know too well, but these veterans like Galchenyuk and Paquette. The other one is Derek Stepan. There are rumors out there. He hasn't looked good in the Senators jersey at all. What are you hearing? Could it happen soon that Stepan could be traded?
Yeah, I mean, very much so. I wonder at what point in the negotiations when Ottawa was bringing him over from Arizona, did they find out that his wife was 9 months pregnant? Like I think she gave birth 3 days after the trade. So you have to wonder, taking the pandemic and the travel restrictions into account as well, how much it made sense for Derek Stepan to come to a country that he's never played in. He's an American that was drafted by the Rangers and went to Arizona. And now he's coming to this brand new situation with all sorts of restrictions in what the NHLers can do as well. I think that it worked out as poorly as possible. So what I'm thinking is maybe when Pierre Dorion realized that, he turned around, because later that day he went out and took on some salary from Tampa to help them out and got what he gave up for Derek Stepan being a second-round pick. So I wonder how soon after they realized it wouldn't work. He's a great pro. Like, you hear Derek Stepan, the way he talks, he's had a great career. There's no doubt about it, but it's just not a fit right now. Ottawa needs speed in their lineup, especially in their bottom six. And if Derek Stepan can't hold down a spot in the top six, which he just has not been able to do, you look at Colin White, Chris Tierney, and of course Josh Norris as the three guys who have been able to cement those top 9 spots. And now you have a guy who doesn't play with pace on the fourth line, playing with Austin Watson, whose pace is all he knows. So you need to get a guy who can complement that with a fourth line. I think my perfect fourth line has just guys who are willing to skate as fast as they can and hit everything on the forecheck. And that's just not Stepan's game. And that's not a detriment about him. He's a great playmaker when the puck's on his stick, but he just isn't getting in those situations in Ottawa. And it's a lost cause. I wonder how much they're going to just hold on to him just because of what they gave up. They don't want it to look so bad and embarrassing that it didn't work out. But if he was on waivers, I think fans would just say, hey, you took a swing and you missed. There goes the second-round pick, and that's too bad. Ottawa's still with 4 second-round picks in the next 2 years. They've got an extra one this year from Columbus from the Ryan Dzingel trade, and then adding the one from Tampa Bay, as I mentioned before. So I don't think fans would really be too mad about that. I think it would actually be a benefit, because then you're opening up a spot for a Logan Brown or another young, hungry player to get into the lineup.
Dorian was quoted saying, "He's someone that defends well and takes the body. He's very underrated at what he brings to the table." And he's talking about the 5th overall pick in the 2020 draft, Jake Sanderson, the 18-year-old defender from in North Dakota University now. How's his progress going? Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been following closely because I mentioned it's not only Jake Sanderson, but it's Jacob Bernard-Docker. It's Tyler Clevin, the K-Train, as we refer to him on Locked On Senators, and Shane Pinto, the best faceoff man in the nation. Those are all first and second round picks for the Ottawa Senators. So there's 4 prospects at North Dakota. And Nodak Sens, as we call them, the hashtag out on Twitter, is they're a top 3 team in the country in the NCAA. So there's championship aspirations there. Jake Sanderson actually put 2 years of high school into one so that he could be a freshman this year. He's an extremely late birthday, a July birthday for this NHL draft. So one of the youngest players in the draft, and his trajectory throughout the pandemic, once hockey stopped, Jake Sanderson's trajectory kept soaring because scouts were going back and watching video and seeing that it's not the flashiness of his game, but he is just so damn consistent. Everything he does is poised is analyzed, and he thinks 2 steps ahead. His hockey IQ is by far, I shouldn't say by far because his skating is right there with it. But when you have that deadly combination of quick feet and a quick brain, you're going to be a good defenseman. And he has the bloodlines. His dad's one of the fastest players in NHL history. Jeff Sanderson, playing with the Boston Bruins and a little bit with the Hartford Whalers. Really funny, quick story I'll tell you about Jake Sanderson in the draft. Not only was Jake Sanderson drafted by Ottawa, but also a player named Ridley Gregg. He was the 3rd first-round pick, 28th overall. Well, Ridley Gregg and Jake Sanderson's dad, Jeff, were both drafted by the Hartford Whalers in the same draft 20 years ago, in the 1990 draft. So 20 years later, after they both go in the same draft to the same team, their sons go in the same draft to the same team. So I thought that was kind of a really cool parallel for a team that does that a lot. I mentioned all the players at North Dakota. Well, they also took Igor Sokolov in the 2nd round, who was a billet brother of Drake Batherson, who's a blue chip prospect for them in Cape Breton. So they like having these little connections all around the team. There's plenty more where that came from. Also, Josh Norris, when he gets acquired, Pierre Dorion going out to say, well, he's Brady Tkachuk's best friend, like kind of selling the fans on that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how much to read into it. It seems like a bit of a sabermetric, but that was a long-winded way of saying Jake Sanderson has looked fantastic in limited time. He was a guy who made Team USA's World Junior team. You're like, oh, is he going to play like every game? And then you're like, oh, is he going to be top 4? Then he leads the entire blue line in minutes. So he's just a guy who, the more you watch him, the more impressed you're going to be with his play.
Nice throwback. Jeff Sanderson. Love that guy from Hay River, Northwest Territories in Canada.
Yeah, so not only that, but then his son, so now Jake, is the first player ever from Montana, where he was born, to be drafted to the NHL. So that's kind of cool there too.
You can find him on Twitter at Ross Levitan. Ross, thank you for stopping by.
Hey, really appreciate the time, Peter. Anytime.
Thanks to all our guests this week. It was some heated talk with Dave, John, and I really enjoyed it. We have some varying opinions with the offside rules. You really can't have it both ways. It was also great chatting with Ross. The Sens have a good future with this core. Let's hope they can build upon it in the next few years. Remember, if you've enjoyed anything you've heard in this episode, or don't, please tweet at me or even our guests. You can follow me on Twitter at Russia98 or the entire team at Jablam Sports. If you want, you can also contact us on our website. You can use the hashtag at Jablam Sports, Jablam Sports, that's JABLAM, and our website is jablamsports.com/contact for our contact page there. Please check out our website. Go to jablamsports.com to see all our podcasts and even game notes for each episode, including this one. And you'll get our guests' info and links to things we mentioned on this show. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify. And of course, click on the 3 dots in your podcasting app and share this episode with 3 friends you know. Please and thank you. Also, follow us on our Facebook group, Jablam Sports. Check us out, folks. Shout out this week to Jeff Merrick. I wanted to take the time to give a shout out to Jeff because he's been a role model for me. He's professional, terrific. I've always liked the way he hosts a panel, his great knowledge of hockey, and how he's still pretty unique from other broadcasters. And to every one of our listeners, I'm giving you a virtual hug. Stay healthy, listen, be yourself, and stay strong.